Hey everybody, this is Squirrel with House of White presents Squirrel and Friends. I've got Will with me today. How you doing, Will?
Yeah, great, thanks. Really good.
Will is a fellow student that is in one of my groups, and I brought him on today to get to know the students a little better. Will, what did you want to talk about today?
Oh, I just thought we might go through maybe my experiences with the school and and with tarot, which is pretty much synonymous. It's like I don't really have much experience with tarot at all outside of the school, short of a few readings that I've gone for and that kind of thing, and a few people I've known who kind of mucked around with it and whatnot. But yeah, so the last 18 months, which has just been hardcore immersion since I first found Dusty's videos on YouTube and then moved on to the white book and then to the black and then joined the College of Knowledge and then joined the study groups. And
You said you don't have a whole lot of experience with the tarot. How did you get into the tarot? What led you to it and when?
I'd always really dug I suppose you could say, the mystique. I'll be honest and say that I really did just dig the mystique, the kind of popular image, the way that so many people do. I've always liked folklore and mythology and whatnot, and I've had my fair share of strange adventures, you could say,
Yeah.
and encounters and this, that, and the other. And I was always interested in synchronicity and metaphysics and divination, but I didn't practice anything. And I dug that popular, fairly superficial kind of mystique of the one that's linked, the image that's linked to fairgrounds and sideshows and carnies and
Yeah.
that kind of thing. Because I like that whole world. Like, I really like that. But like I say, I was also interested in mythology and archetypes and stories and that sort of stuff. I've got a little silver pendant of the Fool, a little thing I've worn for 10 years. It just appealed to me. I couldn't go past it, never without it. And so the general popular imagery always appealed to me, but I never ever thought that I'd be reading.
That's kind of funny because of the way the school is very much not to the popular image. It's a lot different. So, what led you to this school?
Well, so the idea of actually taking it up, taking it on board, and having an honest crack at it came to me. It was a bolt from the blue. It just was it really was just instantaneous one night. It was real Ace of Wands kind of stuff, and I'd had a few upheavals and changes and relocations, and then one night, without really thinking about it too much, it just hit me. So I got onto YouTube and I familiarised myself with those brief introduction to the deck kind of videos, and then from there thought, well, I better learn the methodology, because I wasn't sure how it went in terms of, is everyone self-taught? Are there personal teachers? I'd seen a poster when I was down in Melbourne for Learn Tarot. It was in this, one of those they've got all these groovy laneways down there, and it's all like street art and cafes. And sure enough, fitting perfectly in, there's this poster with the Fool on it, Learn Tarot. And I remember thinking, there's no way I could do that. I just thought it's just going to be way too complex, and that I'll just be a sort of outside observer and mystified appreciator. But then after that night, so I just thought, okay, here we go. And I was watching every YouTube I could find for a couple of months. And I'd got hold of a book that was pretty moralistic. I'm not sure. It was this kind of generic sort of little book. It's just kind of moralistic, and I didn't get anything out of that. It was reading the riot act, like what you shouldn't do, and never do this, never do that, it was going through the usual sort of rote things with traditional meanings. And then also Eden Gray's book just turned up, like Tarot Revealed, which I really dig as a document, as a kind of historical document. You open it and then, the oldest book known to man, and it's quite dramatic. And again, with regards to the methodology, it was all pretty. It's only a few pages, at least the edition I've got is. Most of it, I think, as a guide for traditional meanings. I think it's probably fine by and large. But in terms of actually learning anything, it was all this sort of let the querent pick up something with their left hand, and
I know that's who I learned. That's how I learned was Eden Gray. I'm so glad I don't do that anymore. But yes, it was a book I carried with me for 3 years.
righto, yeah, it seems to
Yeah.
come up a lot with people, yeah. And it had terms like good and evil, for good or for evil in the back, and it's all a bit, dramatic and quaint, I thought. But I just think it's probably holds its own, I imagine, in terms of traditional meanings. But I didn't really pursue anything with that. I just kept on with checking out things on YouTube, and I found that I wasn't getting much at all. I was trying, I was really trying to pay attention, and to try and glean some sort of something solid out of it that I could really work with. But a lot of them, I find it's a bit showy, and also from the point of view of someone who simply wants to learn stuff, to click onto things, and it'll be someone sitting there talking at length about their favourite cards in a sort of almost as totems, and that's cool. Like I appreciate that, but so you fast forward through it, and 15 minutes later, they're still saying that how this card is, speaks to me, and it's like, okay, cool, but I'm not learning much here. I'm not getting anything much out of that. There's this, ironically enough, that the same mystique that probably piques a lot of people's interest in tarot was simply being furthered in a lot of these so-called instructional talks, which seem to be very fluffy bunny.
Yeah. And not any meat.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's the upshot. That's exactly the term. There was no meat. It was just vague, and I'm there like really for hours on end, day in and out, trying to glean something from it, and trying to find something to work with. And I found a lot of it. Like, I understand these people enjoy their whole take on things and whatnot, but I found a lot of it was very white bread, new ageism, and it wasn't instructional. They weren't tutorials. A lot of them were just doing stuff about, a card of the day and waving it around in front of the camera. And then, even then, not really delineating much, just kind of going on a bit. And there are a couple of things too that seem to go for an almost life's little instruction book, kind of off the cuff life philosophy that wasn't getting to the meat, wasn't getting to the bones of the deck and the methods or anything much like that. But I persevered for a while, and eventually then one day I saw Dusty's lessons come up, and they were completely different. It was completely different from everyone else's. I mean, for starters, he wasn't sitting there with the camera on himself, sort of just holding forth. It was all about the cards. It was just all on the cards. And I knew in about 10 seconds that this is exactly how I was. That was an epiphany. I was so inspired because I just thought, well, I knew that this is something that I can work with. This is something like, this is just getting down to business. It's not just kind of any old thing, and this is sort of pretty feel good and empowering or anything like that. I mean, he wasn't even, like I say, he wasn't even speaking directly to the camera. The camera's on the cards. Everything's on the cards. It was explanatory.
Yes, and everything. So it's hard to imagine if you haven't experienced it, finding a school that shows tarot in a practical light instead of veiled all in mystery. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I was actually reeling as a result of it. I couldn't believe it. There was it was a quantum leap. It was a completely different realm of being able to learn. And so I set about it with, that's what started me
S-
to properly get into it.
So did you join the course right away, or did you feel it out for a little while?
I got hold of I watched everything I could find on YouTube. I watched the stuff of Dusty, Dusty speaking with Ish and Dusty down near the creek, and just doing never-ending story games, friends and enemies, blending everything that was there. And then I ordered the white book, which it turns out I could have bought in Sydney, but I just ordered it. The only reason I say that is because it is widely available. Like, I see it a lot. And I was delighted with that. And I just I decided early on that I would set about it in very much in a wax on, wax off way, because that's what I'd been looking for. I didn't even know there was such a way, to be honest. I don't know. I didn't know what there was. I thought maybe you had to feel your way through some sort of esoterica or something. And so to find that there was the good old wax on, wax off exercises, and then concurrent learning, everything I could find, but to be able to go back to those exercises, to be able to go back to push-ups, was great. And I made a point of doing it all the time. So I'd just get the deck out and I'd say, well, I'm just going to do, I'll do three rounds of whatever various exercises, and then I'd sort of mix them up a bit. So I might blend, and then friends and enemies, and then sequential stuff, and all that sort of stuff, as I'm learning about the Celtic Cross and everything in the white book. So it was just practice. It was tarot gym for me, the white book, and I felt it. I felt it by the day, you know.
What was the deciding factor? Why did you end up joining the academy?
After the white book, of course, I got the black book, and then I was just immersed in that, and I thought, okay, like this is so full on. This will really keep me busy, which it is full on, and it did keep me busy, and it still does. But I was putting off this nagging sense that there was more to do and more to learn, and Dusty said as much, and I'd hear him say as much in various tutes and whatnot. Join, and I thought, well, I've got the black book, that'll keep me busy. But I felt that he was speaking personally to me, to be honest, and in terms of just in terms of, don't think you've got it all sorted. You will get so much more out of joining up. And so the reason I put it off, I don't really participate in forums online or anything like that. And I'd gone off social media a bit even, and that kind of thing. And I wasn't sure, what was exactly involved. But then again, another quantum leap, I did join, and everything was there. And I was just into it. I just went headfirst into it. Yeah, so I got into the lessons, and they're so thorough, and there's so much gold packed into any given thing, into every given thing. There's so much gold, and I couldn't believe it. So it's just this ocean of knowledge and methodology and ephemeral stuff, that comes in that's interesting, and you name it, and all the other features of the school, such as the recommended reading and things. So I got hold of that occult history of the tarot and read that, and sort of I wanted to learn about the history of it and the culture, the various cultures involved, as well as doing tarot gym and learning everything that I was learning through the school, which was Heaps, heaps. Yeah.
So you thought that was a pretty good decision. You don't regret that at all, do you?
No, I took the red pill. I'm down the rabbit hole. So I mean, there's no coming back. I mean, I can't really take the blue pill again.
You don't
Yeah,
want the
no,
blue pill.
no.
So, okay, from what I'm understanding, you were not a social creature as far as forums and groups and this and that. So you joined the academy, and I can tell from the excitement in your voice that you were enjoying it. What what spurred you to finally join groups? I'd like to talk about groups.
Yeah, with groups, okay, the upshot was that I realised that everything had worked so far and everything had been exponential. So from the YouTube free lessons to the white book to the black book to the school lessons to the course itself, everything had worked so far that clearly you couldn't go wrong. Like it's just exponential. So that was, yeah, that was the next stage. And then I'd never used Skype before. Um, I'm pretty tech phobic, and so that was the first time I'd ever done it. I went out and got the headset, and everyone was just such nice people. I can't recommend groups enough. You know, everyone I've met on groups, they're just such nice people. See, no one's competitive, and that's in keeping with the school. There's no ego, there's no dogma. You know, there never is. Of course, with anything here, and so one thing very early on in the piece that really stuck with me was when, well, a few times that Dusty has said there's no room for superstition if you're going to read tarot properly. If you're going to approach it in any worthwhile way, you've got to jettison all that, and that's always stayed with me, that all the way. It's ironic because, of course, the general public is clouded with, superstitions, and or the general reception to it as being what it is. But it's it's one of the most practical things I've ever done. And there's all this interesting supplementary and related stuff. But yeah, it was just getting down to it. And the thing is with groups too, it was being able to talk with people who spoke the same language because they were of the school. And part of that was the lack of bullshit, like that's a given. That's a given. But that they were coming through the same learning process, and they'd internalized and used the same methods, even if they'd tried other things, which a lot of people previously had done, like I say, I'm only of the school in my, whereas other people, and this is such a great endorsement for it. You've got people with 20-year backgrounds and whatnot in practicing tarot, and they stick with the school, and they're changed through the school, and they're in meeting groups all the time, or they run them like yourself. And I think that's one of the greatest endorsements that it could all have. But yeah, there was no competitive vibe ever. It's not like, and everyone was just everyone was cool, but no one was like trying to be cool, if you know what I mean. Like, there's no nerds, and I don't mean that in the good nerd way, like, because that's probably me too anyway. But like, I don't mean comic nerds and stuff or Dungeons and Dragons, like, but you know what I mean, like people trying to be Gnostic monks who
Right.
can see through the Matrix, but even though ironically, like, they can, but they weren't, trying to be this sort of big cool thing. I knew that would be the case, of course, because I'd listened to everything that I could find beforehand. I'd gone through so much stuff, and I got to that point where I had to be involved because I'd listened to so much, and I lessons like some lessons I'd listened to. Lesson 36 on hidden spreads. I've probably gone through that about 4 times, stuff like that. So the vibe of the community was already very familiar to me. And I remember the first time I spoke with you, that was kind of weird because, like, yeah, you're like one of the House of White rock stars. So that was cool. And so yeah, here we are.
Oh my gosh.
But, but yeah, I knew I couldn't go wrong. Basically, I knew I could, and of course I couldn't.
What I find exceptional about groups myself is, as we know, I've been reading since God was born. But then come these students that have never read before, and I learn so much from them, from their point of view, from what they have to say. I'm not running the group. I'm there learning from all the other students, things that, wow, I would have never considered. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah, every time too. Hey, it's every time someone's got something. It's because I'm in a early stages group with Leslie here and a couple of people, and then I'm in more advanced roundabout stuff and whatnot with yourself and the crew. And there's always something. I've had stuff that's just blown me away in terms of. I'm sure everyone has, and that's a tenet of the whole experience. That's always a given. In terms of wow, I really never would have thought of it that way. I didn't look at it that way, and every single time, it's egalitarian in its approach to learning. It's not doctrinal. I mean, obviously there's the expertise that comes through with yourself and people moderating and whatnot, and but yeah, but it's this kind of all. It's very so inclusive. It's so inclusive, and it's just so cheerful too. That's the other thing. It's always just really good fun.
Yeah.
Really good fun.
So you never felt like an outsider in the group?
Never. No, no, not at all. This is the thing. Because of the rapport that's there, I reckon it would be hard enough without the school. Okay, so if you were just in a much more amorphous kind of general sort of nebulous tarot sensibility, I think you'd still feel alone. And then within that, someone who's practicing or learning, as I was before I joined the study groups, I mean, you're going to possibly feel even more alone again because you're on this really, really clearly explained, uh, methodical path, right? But no one knows about it. No one you know. Well, no one I know. I can only speak for myself. Are you able to really talk about it with? And people who are in that greater amorphous tarot world, I don't think you can talk with them either if they're not school. I mean, you can talk with them, but do you know what I mean? Like in terms of your own learning curve, in terms of your own adventure
Yeah.
and study within it, because a lot of them are drifting in, I think, a much vaguer world. I'm not trying to discount everyone, obviously, but you can't. You're part of this. So to join was really edifying, hey, because it's like you're talking to people who do the exercises, who understand all these things that you're doing and learning and practicing every day yourself. And they could be people who are reading professionally, or they could be busy people who factor it into their lives but are forging ahead, and everything in between. And it's been terrific, yeah.
Awesome. Okay, I got a real big question for you now. Um, you said that you knew very little about tarot and were having a hard time discerning anything from the internet and what you had found until you found the academy. How has joining the academy and the groups affected your reading and your life?
Immensely, immensely, more than I can say. In terms of readings, which I hadn't done before, but in terms of just coming through the school and then getting to the point where I've read one on one, I did a lot of internet sort of correspondence readings and by way of practice, and clocked up my 100 and all the rest of it. But when it came time to a one on one, when I was sought out by a sort of friend of a friend type thing, which I did in public, I'd had everything in place in terms of training, so nothing was left to chance. So it's like military training, I think, in some ways. That side of it, that methodical thing. Like, I mean, you were in the Marines, yeah, so you know what I mean. Like, that sense of drilling,
Jill.
and but more than that, also like there's the basics, there's the gym work or what exercises, and then more advanced stuff, and then going over it again and again and again. So when it came time to do it, and I found myself on stage, as Dusty says, I was fine because I just reminded myself as I'm listening and shuffling and talking and all the rest of it, of the sequence of the procedure, which I know it's not cast iron, like it's reasonably flexible, but it's still a procedure. Everything came together. All these things, everything that I'd learned, it was all there. So in that instance, so that's like the first, whatever it was, 5 minutes. You're just there. When you're on stage, having come through the school, you're all right. You're all right. I had it verified, and away we went. And from there we went to a roundabout. Like that was nearly 2 hours actually. That whole session, a Celtic cross and a roundabout, and you're prepared. You're not stuffing around. You're not guessing. You don't panic.
Yeah.
Uh, you don't bullshit. You don't. It's all there. It's all in place. I don't know how else people do it. I don't know any other way that people do it. I'm sure they do. I mean, obviously they do, but that's my experience of it. It was a case of using all those methods, those sequences, and knowing, and things like knowing once you've verified it, once that you're all right, you're fine. You're fine. You've got a spread there that's fine. You verify it, and clients looking kind of vaguely transported, like but you're sticking to it, and you want to just wring the juice out of it, like it's not like you want to get through it and hope that, oh, that was okay. That's a
Yeah.
relief. It's like you want to wring the juice out of it. It's like even things, for instance, that is a big one for me, and that became again obvious early on, as it would for everyone, that the client's emphasis or the general public's idea of an emphasis on outcomes being this big thing, being the main thing, and of course we don't think that way, and it doesn't. We don't go about it that way. You've got this overview stuff and the interrelationship, and I just love hidden spreads. That's why I watched that lesson 36 so many times. I put a lot of work into hidden spreads last year with the Black Book, but the understanding on that, plus new knowledge and a great extrapolation on it, like a great expansion on those spreads and what they meant, can only be delivered, I think. I mean, in terms of the lessons, in terms of long explanatory lessons, that you can use them and get them out of the Black Book, of course, but it just goes through the roof with the course. So there I was, happily, like I was having the time of my life actually, like just going through various hidden spreads, and then getting a significator for protagonist who wasn't the client for a second spread with the roundabout, and just hammering through that, and using hidden spreads within the roundabout or various configurations. And yeah, I really loved it. It was a great experience, and it was 100% school.
And how did that client react?
Oh, she was delighted. Yeah, she was. She had this sort of look, like, and yeah, it was funny because I forget. That's the other thing. In forgetting about bullshit from day one, you stay forgotten. You know what I mean? It stays forgotten. I was interested in working the methods. I was interested in working the hidden spreads, getting the language right, tweaking the positions if need be. So the idea of any theatre, I haven't had any sense of that the whole time. So to be doing it like that, I'm just in method mode, and very present, loving it. It's not like it's not like how I would have seen it from the outside once, is I suppose what I'm saying, and I'd gone for readings before. In my life, I'd only had about 4 or 5 probably before I found House of White. And I thought I was there like I was one of the few people ever to go for a reading, and it was like this profound thing. And this is the other thing, of course. Looking back, they were pretty ambiguous in their approach, like most of these readers. So a couple of them even had an expression as I mumbled my query, almost apologetically, because you're in awe of this esoteric sphere where you feel like you're out of your depth or something. I don't know. Plus, generally you're going to have a sort of problem that's got you feeling a little bit frazzled anyway. They didn't ask me anything, they didn't. And when I tried to explain, it was almost like, yeah, whatever. And then it's like, and then there's 1,000 cards on the table, and it's like, well, different decks. I mean, well, certainly there's like half the deck, like is on the table, and I'm looking at this and like trying to glean some sort of meaning out of a couple of things, and one of them was Thoth anyway, so it looks even weirder, and like, yeah. And looking back at it though, no, thumbs down.
Yeah, we don't play the vagueness game with we get pretty up close and personal. Get all up in that Kool-Aid. So
Yeah,
one of the things I just want to stress too that it's not it's not so much methodology and you have to do everything exactly. One of the things I really like about Dusty is if it works for you, it's right for you. So if something that he teaches just doesn't click with you, you still learn it, but you say, okay, this isn't accurate for me. It's almost like he teaches us, and I heard this saying the other day, and I just loved it for the school, is learn the rules like a pro so you can break them like an artist.
yeah, I love that. Yeah, no, for sure. Like, I don't want to come across as a zealot, because I know that that Dusty says, like, try everything. If it interests you, try it. And I always keep an eye out and an ear out for various ideas. And some people in groups, especially when it's almost, I suppose you could say, interdisciplinary or cross-disciplinary, like where someone's got this and that going on, they might have oracle cards. Like, I can listen to all that, and I find it really interesting. Or if they've got different ways of doing things, and it's not like I'm feeling like, no, that's heresy or anything like that. I'm definitely see. One thing I think I'd mentioned it in one of our groups, so I think I related it to you and Liz, was that that's not the usual way that I do it. Well, for starters, I wouldn't normally do a 3-card spread, but I did one with regards to a real issue. It wasn't just an exercise, but a card jumped, and it was verifiable. So I thought, right, there you go. So what I did was I kept at it, and I net the other 2 cards jump, which they did, and the whole thing was completely congruous. It was a 3-card spread. Now, I wouldn't normally do that. I'm not going to sit there and just like kind of brazenly shuffle away and hope for jumpers, which I got. And then so I did another one, and it was the same. It was clear as a bell. So I just enjoyed doing that, because I wouldn't do that with a client, but I did it and it worked. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, we're at that point where we can experiment and play around and as we got this, and I don't mean to sound frou-frou, but we've got this communication with the universe, and it wants to experiment with us, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, well,
So,
that's what I felt. I really felt that. I just thought, okay, this is it. We're doing it a bit different. This is sort of a bit punkier. Like it's their jumpers. It's 3-card, and like I said, I don't do them generally. And but yeah, worked a treat. It was great. And there's a few other things that I know everyone's might be a little bit different in their various ways. Like I don't always nominate a significator, and I often don't. I often draw that. And then a couple of other things. I think I once mentioned that I got the ding. I got the ding for card position 1 in a Celtic Cross, but only for that. I got the ding for effectively a significator, and then I reshuffled, and then I got a second ding. Whole thing's fine. Whole thing's verified. So I got a double dinger, and that doesn't happen. That doesn't
That
happen a
doesn't
lot.
happen a lot, I can tell you.
No,
No.
that's a lucky day.
Oh my gosh. So it sounds like you've had some good experiences and that you did a lot of research before you chose the school. I'd like to know if you have any regrets in joining the school.
Oh no,
Besides
not at
the
all.
obvious one that you wish you'd joined sooner. No.
Well, even that, it's like I wouldn't. I'd found it. I don't want to get all like too Oprah about it, but like I had found it when I had to find it. I'd found it in, and I know there's like every walk of life's represented in the school and every kind of approach to things. I'd found it when I was I'd found myself in a state of solitude, and I was quite all right with that. So that's I gave it and still do a lot of focus. That's how I've learned. So before, if had I found it before, I don't. Yeah, well, I didn't. You know what I mean? So therefore, for
Yeah.
me, it's synonymous with coming out of a few things, and then just finding the right teacher and the right school and the right people. That for me, because like I know that for others, they might get onto YouTube and to look at the hits, like obviously a lot of people do, other that various things might resonate with them. It didn't for me, it doesn't for me, and now being wherever I am with it as a result of the school, I look at that stuff and the vast majority of it doesn't resonate with me, and I just think this is some kind of showmanship or self-indulgence at worst. At its very best, there's people who are actually on the same wavelength, like all chiming in. But from a student point of view, or from only speaking for myself, it just didn't resonate. And there's no comparison with that kind of thing to me. This sort of kind of new agey, cross-pollinated, and I think often solipsistic thing. It's like this sing-song kind of, yeah, like okay, cool, whatever, that's great. And like I dig archetypes and folklore and all of it, the whole thing, and various other things I've looked into and am interested in. But in terms of getting down to it, getting down to the bones and having stuff to work with and learning at a rate of knots and constantly expanding on that, constant gains. Yeah, House of White, easy tarot lessons all the way, all the way.
And for those listening that don't know, you can find it at easytarotlessons.com. And it's $1 for the first month. And get into those groups. You can get into those groups on the first month. There are a great many schools out there. I do suggest looking to see the one that resonates with you. If you're sitting on the fence, come on, it's $1. We'll take care of you.
Sure will, sure will. Yeah, I think one of the things too with it all is it's the way that it can be applied, the way you learn through the school, that the openness and the flexibility and the lack of reverence. It's not that it's irreverent for the sake of being so, but you know what I mean? Like that there's always something to do. There's always something to work with, and there's this sense of what I think of as basically the glory in the mundane, the so-called mundane.
Yeah.
That because I'm kind of one of those people anyway who's happiest if I'm sitting there with a coffee just watching the world go by. That's an adventure to me. Like that's loaded with detail, And with tarot, with learnings, is that you can see where things can be applied at every point. You can see how things can be read at every point and how things can be represented and understood all over the place. And that gets away from that dogma and that sort of weightiness, that almost wishful grandiosity. I mean, obviously there's some issues in life that are big deal, like that are grand to the people involved. But it's being able to see it everywhere and use it everywhere and look at all possible meanings in the language, in the context, that everything comes down to question, spread, position, card in position, relationship of cards to other cards in other positions, and all the rest of it. You know, things like that interesting one where Dusty moves the card through the roundabout, through all 12 positions, and you can see the completely different significance one to the next.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. The flexibility. It feels like you've learnt to juggle or something. It's like you're not tied down. You know, like that. There's this great liberation that it's not this solemn sort of ceremonial kind of thing. You know, like. But there's this great sense of flexibility. To me, it feels like you're juggling. You, you
But
know,
you
you're
know
juggling.
how.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, with control. I was going to say controlled and unrushed and unclouded. It's made me very objective. It's really made me very objective. Like more than pretty much anything, short of studying in just off on my own, studying things about human behaviour and social psychology and these kind of things where it sort of can make you quite objective. Along with that, with tarot, it's like right, yep, it's the idea of this all-encompassing nature of all things, and that as they say, the saying like it takes all sorts.
Hmm.
That's what I often think about it, and not that I was getting around being some like hardcore judgmental sort of person or anything, but just to look at it, it's that sense of a professional responsibility, and like that you're there in the capacity of a professional, effectively. It's that sense of like, you don't go into that subjectively and, start throwing your opinion around or whatever, or allow yourself to be clouded by it. And that I've found has really been an interesting thing for myself. So just earlier on, you asked me about how it's changed me in the broader sense too. It's made me more objective, definitely.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And it I feel like it gives a deeper understanding of the people around you and makes us much more tolerant to other people's perceived flaws. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, and their perspectives and the way that perspective works, the way that attitude itself is shaped, or that outlook and expectation and all these things are shaped, the way that they're multifaceted human phenomena. Uh, it's fascinating, and to be able to stand away from that, and to be this is why when I say the glory of the mundane, it's never like the meetings are never the study groups are never Groundhog Day, and tarot as we do it, probably as everyone does it, is never Groundhog Day for me. Like my relationship in it is with the spread. Like, so if someone's there and it's a fairly commonplace sort of inquiry, especially if it's the commonplace inquiry, I'm just I'm listening obviously and everything like that. But I'm engaging with the spread. I get to engage with the spread. So there's nothing mundane. So I'm not thinking, well, Jesus Christ, that's a pretty humdrum kind of thing. Okay, you know what I mean? I'm just thinking, cool. What have we got here? Like what have we got to work with? How much can we get out of this?
Sounds like you're really advancing with your tarot skills and regular everyday life.
Yeah, I one way or another, I do something every day with tarot, and I've gone back and I'm listening to some lessons again, and I sought to expand in various, the way, and then you start looking into things, into various related fields, and then the way everything, sooner or later, everything matches up. And of course, I'm looking forward to studying classical astrology too, as the roundabout that got me most. Again, a lifelong kind of outsider interest, to sort of, in that, definitely lifelong. But I'm looking forward to getting into classical astrology, and it was the roundabout that really fired that up for me. Like with the roundabout, I wouldn't have been able to to do that any. Well, I mean, you can with the Black Book for sure. You can for sure. Like, but this amount that came out through the tubes, yeah, man, it just went took it to the vertical.
Yeah, yeah, that head explodey stuff. That's
Mm.
the oh my God. Some of the stuff we do, I'll chase my tail for hours just walking in circles trying to chase that thought down. So, but it
Yeah.
gets pretty intense. Okay, probably ought to wrap this up. I could talk to you for days and days and days. I will
Same,
have you
same.
back. I will have you back, please, as a guest. But thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Oh, look, well, thank you. Thanks a million, and thanks for always being there too. Because that's the other thing. If I've got a question, you always answer me, and all your other students, like this multitude of other students, like all these people that you get back to. You guys get back to people. Everyone helps, and everyone helps each other, and there's always something to learn. There's always going to be someone who says something that I'd never think of, and and you hear other people having these real breakthroughs as well, and there's people bringing different things to it. Yeah, no, it's just brilliant.
Yeah.
It's
It's a community. It is not just a school. It is a community, and I believe that we forged some true friendships out of it.
yeah, I could tell as soon as I started listening to the early stuff that it was cause that it's really adult. Like that's I think the difference. You know what I mean? Like I think that's the difference really. Like initially and consistently is it's adult, and by that I mean it's clear. It's clear. It's not fluffy. It's not, and there's angles going off everywhere, and there's all possibilities, but it doesn't compare to this sort of club of the vague kind of stuff that's out there for other things. And I know there are people in it with all sorts of different things, and there are people with all sorts of very interesting esoteric interests within it, and there's people in it who are probably, well, I know there are people in it who are into Wicca and various things, and I've got all these things I dig as well. Um, but it's just adult. It's just like even things like including that book as recommended reading, the one by Decker and Dumit, The Occult History of the Tarot. See, that wouldn't necessarily, apparently it didn't go down well with a lot of people because that's going to burst a bubble, you know what I mean? But an adult approach is, well, yeah, you can look at the stuff from the history of the Golden Dawn and all the foibles and all that kind of thing. But that's not some argument against everything. That's just a realistic, perspective on the historical aspect of that particular, of the deck that we use. And I think for me that's important to know that because I see that deck every day. And I've always loved it anyway. This is just an aside. But people talk about, it's just the daggy old Rider-Waite or Smith-Waite. But I love it. It's my favourite. It's my favourite deck anyway. So, but just learning all those kind of things with a kind of adult objectivity, and the vibe among everyone. But I just want to say definitely a big thanks to you and because you always get back to me, and I have a meet with Leslie here, and I'm going to meet others, I'm sure. And the communication is terrific.
That's good to hear. I'm glad we're keeping the ball going because we're the future. We are the future of tarot reading, and when people see what we can do and the communication we have with each other, it's going to change how tarot is perceived.
I reckon so.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so very much, Will. People will be hearing from you again because I'm going to be jumping on you for another podcast soon. I want to do that one on
Sweet.
synchronicity with you and Robin.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, I'd love to. Thanks. Yeah. No, thank you. Thanks so much for all your time and for all the communication and the inclusion. Because I wouldn't be without the study groups now. It's a massive leap from just doing books and lessons.
thank you for being here.
No worries, and thank you. Thanks a million.
Bye bye.
See ya.